No? Nothing? Nothing? Abi? It doesn't really matter. It's supposed to be modern philosophy. It's kind of like when I talk to my mom about people, students, and she gives me this old school philosophy of life. And I keep telling her, Mom, that's not the way things work anymore. Hello. You can maybe occupy the seat. Thank you. Okay, anyways, it doesn't really matter what class this is. It's just a class. A bunch of people with, what's your name?
Ted.
Ted?
Yes.
And your? Leah. What's your last name?
Paul.
Did you email me? Why? Oh, okay. I'm sorry, Abby, go ahead. I'm sorry, Abby, did you? Go ahead, it's okay. Bro, can you? Go ahead.
Why? What we know.
Say again. How do you apply traditional values to modern life? It's like, how do you apply the tradition of Socrates to modern philosophy? You know who Angela Davis is, right? Sometimes I see her walking with Gina, her friend. They've been companions for many years now with their couple of dogs. She did so much in the 1960s and then 70s. She lost her job, served time a little bit. And sometimes when I see her walking, of course I never mention my thoughts to her in this way. I wonder, given the way society is today, the way music is, who holds power, and that power is used in what way? What exactly is her place? She was even expressing some dismay about what Cornel West is doing. I guess he's running as an independent, taking votes away from Kamala. The truth is, the past, I think 30, 40, 50 years, it has been such an eruption of new things that old tradition doesn't really have a stand a chance to kind of survive. I mean, it's amazing. Marriages stand at a 70% divorce. And if your question is, well, how do you keep a traditional marriage going? I don't know. I mean, it's like, how do you resurrect a business that's 70% under, is going bankrupt? What do you do with it? Do you like pick up the shop and just put it somewhere else? Do you change the neighborhood? Do you change the merchandise? And if those are the things you want to do, well, what sort of merchandise are you going to bring in that will attract customers? Depression is about 60%. I mean, these are devastating things, numbers. And if your question is, well, how does that tradition that used to be in play for 100 years or 200 years or 300 years, how do we apply them today? I don't really know. It's too much. There's a term in sociology that I don't really remember, but it's kind of like this tsunami coming your way, and there is this, you happen to be this twig, this tiny little branch right in the middle of it, and you say, I'm a Christian, I'm a Jew, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Buddhist, I'm a this, I'm a that, I'm very strong, and whatever is coming my way, it's not going to impact me, because my philosophy of life is like the shield force. Everything is going to go around it. And sociology would say, no, you're going to get demolished by the force of society. It's not possible. Unless you want to walk away completely from society for a while, go somewhere, you know, kind of it's like the way diamonds are made, like they live in the belly of the mountain, and over the many decades, a good amount of pressure is imposed upon a certain thing that refines it over time, and then you have diamond, and it's unbreakable, you know. And I suppose if you live in modern society, it's really difficult to have your traditional values survive unless you have a huge support system. So, I don't know. You know how many students I've had over the years from Yemen? And these are men who were born here, lived here, went to Yemen, got married, and brought their wife here. The marriages couldn't survive. And despite the man being raised in a traditional environment, despite the woman coming from a very extremely traditional environment, these two worlds collide. It won't last. And of the maybe 20 Yemenis women over the past 20 years of being at Laney I've had, without exception, all 20 of them have failed. Now, if your question is, well, how do you protect it? I don't know. You have to ask Dr. Phil or Oprah Winfrey. Yeah.
I have a follow-up to what you were talking about, like in terms of like your Yemeni students and how a lot of their Americans are not surviving. And I think another thing is, how do we like separate the like difference between like the religion that we follow and what our traditional values teach us? Because when those two kind of collide, like I don't know, like I think that also is another like indication of why like certain marriages and like that are. I mean, that's what I see.
I think if you live in a certain location, there is a software, there are a certain set of programs, and those programs allow you to function in a certain way. Then you bring the hardware, which is you, your body is the hardware, and the way you think about things, the way you function, that's your software. But the hardware and the software used to be in Yemen. Okay. Now you pick up the hardware, your body, and the software, your thoughts. In it, it has family values, it has political values, it has social values, and above all, it has religious values. Right? So every day when you go out, you hear the pray to the call, right? A call to the prayer. You see people fasting. You see people wearing hijab, whatever the case may be. But these are the things that you see on a daily basis. Then you come here. Okay. The hardware, your body is the same, but all of a sudden what you realize is that the world of advertisement begins to change now. Okay. Now what you have are your values from Yemen, but you also want to survive in Oakland. But Oakland is like another software with another set of values. If you want to survive in Oakland, if you want to have your friends, if you want to laugh, if you want to have fun, if you want to be accepted by your friends, these are the ways you need to behave. The problem is the new sets of behavior are going to be very, very different than the old. Given that we are creatures that will do anything to survive, and this is something that goes back to Charles Darwin around the 19th century, is that something about your organism knows that if you want to survive in Oakland, and you do this unconsciously, little by little, you let go of your Yemenis tradition, okay? And you adopt the new ones, because if you don't, your friends will not call you, okay? And then if you have no friends, you'll suffer loneliness and then depression. So something about you says, get rid of this and get rid of that and get rid of the other, and then adopt the new ones. The problem with the new ones is that because you have no experience with them, it takes a while for you. There's going to be a good amount of wrestling match. And eventually, the new tradition is going to win. And it's going to win because traditional values, they put kind of like a chain around you. You know, they hold you hostage. The modern life is mostly about pleasure, and it's about pleasure that comes to you very, very quickly. It's something, I mean, look, Karl Marx, Charles Darwin, Sigmund Freud, these are all products of modern life. You know, you don't have a Karl Marx that came about the 17th century because life was different. You don't have a Sigmund Freud or a Carl Jung in the 15th century because human beings were not designed the way modern people are. And so the only way you will survive is getting rid of the old stuff, adopting the new stuff. The problem with adopting the new stuff is that your parents are going to look at you weirdly. They're going to say, this is not how we function. But they don't really understand the forces of modernity. And so not only do you have to kind of wrestle with your own self within, you also have to wrestle with your traditional community. And so when you're with them, you function a certain way. When you're away from them, you function a completely different way. And then you catch yourself and you realize there's a good amount of conflict within. But from what little I know about the Yemenis culture, they're very, very strong in their culture values. You know? That's the best I can do. Stevie, right? Matthew, anything? Oh, Brooke, yeah.
Is the other question.
Sure.
The Machiavelli principle.
Yeah.
The modern politician leaders use the Machiavelli's principle right now, especially in this past 20 years we've got this.
So Niccolo Machiavelli, so what you have in Europe, and Europe is an environment where Christianity has had a good amount of power, and the message of Christianity is empathy, forgiveness, turn the other cheek, that the kingdom of God lives inside you, that if you turn the cheek enough times after being slapped repeatedly, your enemy will eventually understand. Okay? Be honest, be truthful. So these are the moral codes that even, I don't know if you're aware that when Jimmy Carter became the president, there was an interview. This was the late 1970s. In the interview, he said, I have lust in my heart. Sometimes I close my eyes and imagine like naked women, okay? And this is the 70s, or late 70s, early 80s. And a lot of people began to talk. Why is it that our president can be so candid, open about this stuff? Machiavelli did something really, really amazing. It's not nobility that gets you ahead in life. It's cunningness. It's deceptiveness. It's violence. Hello.
The police just told me they were going to come get you. You don't scared me.
Yeah. I think the most important thing you need to know about Machiavelli is the following. There are three very, very powerful in human being, powerful emotions about us. The emotion of hate, the emotion of fear, and the emotion of love. Right now in my country, about 80 million people hate the current government. Hate the government so much that when Israel attacked Iran just last week, people celebrated. Imagine, you have Israel dropping bombs in your country, and instead of it making people angry, they jump into the streets and they celebrate. That they don't really care if your country is hit. They don't really care if your own people are killed. Why? Because you hate the current regime, and that's what hate does. You don't want people to hate you. Because when you are hated, they will backstab you. They will do anything they possibly can in the dark to topple you. That's what hate does. You don't want people to love you. Because if you love me, or if I love you too much, what's going to happen is you're going to say, Amir, I can't turn my assignment today. You say, Brooke, I love you nevertheless. And little by little, you begin to lose respect for the requirements I have set for this class, to the point that you won't even look at the module. You won't look at any of the posted items. You won't do any of the assignments. Furthermore, when the semester is about to end, you'll come to my office and you say, Amir, you know the reason I love you and I love your class, but the reason I couldn't do the assignments was because A, B, C, D, E, F. I said, yeah, but it's okay, I understand. I'm just going to give you a C or a B. So what love does, eventually, it forces the other person to disrespect you, no longer care for you. The only reason why people show up to this class is not because they hate me, and it's not because they love me. It's because of fear. Fear of their grade, fear of their future, and fear of staying at Laney an extra semester. Rulers or kings or presidents or politicians, you want to make sure people don't hate you. And you want to also make sure people don't love you, but they fear you. The power that you have where laws can be legislated, that if you piss them off, they will make abortion illegal. If you piss them off, if minimum wage is $10, they'll take it down to $5. Or livelihood will be really, really tough. That's the most important thing that Machiavelli had to tell politicians. You know, always do your things behind closed doors so public don't understand and recognize them, see them. Also make sure you don't pass laws that will impose, negative emotions too much on people, because once they grow hatred towards you, you won't be re-elected. And that's what you should do in your romantic relationships. Make sure that you are not loved too much, not hated too much, but feared a lot. That relationship will survive. That's the only good thing about Machiavelli. He made immorality look good. It's beautiful.
You said you want your relationship?
Yes.
What? So, do you want to fear your partner a little bit? you marry or if you want to fear your partner?
You would want to fear the consequences should you cross certain lines.
I mean, I think that's, I guess, respect, but fear.
Fear does create respect.
But if I fear you, I'm not, that's not the thing. We're not even, like, it's not happening.
Well, you don't have to agree with it, but it's something that exists. I mean, look, you don't need to like your boss, but you do fear disobeying what he or she demands of you, because if you don't fear him, and if you don't do as he says, you will lose your job. Fear keeps you working. Fear keeps you in school. The traffic light, when it's red and you look up and there are cameras, the fear of its possibility working and then you running the red light and a ticket coming in the mail for you about $600, that fear. I come to school about 4 in the morning and sometimes the light is red. I look to my left, there is no one. I look to my right, there is no one. There is not a soul in the street. But I put on the brakes for 10 minutes sometimes because I fear the $600 ticket. Fear tames you. Human nature is wild. How old are you, if I may ask? May we get personal? Imagine I'm going to create a story, and it may not be true, but I'm going to create nevertheless. Imagine you graduated high school at the age of 18, but you didn't fear time, you didn't fear age, you didn't fear parents, you didn't fear money, you didn't fear your future. You had hope, and you were in love with all the things that you hoped and dreamed for. I'm going to drop out of school. I'm not going to go to college. That's for losers. I'm just going to go out there and do ABCD. And I'm going to remove some of the difficulties of life that perhaps obstacled you in going to school. You just said, you know, I'm just going to go out there and explore and experience. I'm going to grow differently. I'm going to allow life to educate me. Okay. So you fell in love with the imagination and you had no fear of the practicalities of life, the politics of life, because you're young, you're vigorous. And you say, whatever comes my way, I can overwrite them. There is no reason to fear, except fear itself, as they say, young kids these days. So you live like a hippie. You know, you have a roommate here, you tell your parents, I'm leaving, I'm going to figure out myself, my life, and this and that. Then you age. And then life seasons you a little. And life forces your eyes to be opened painfully. And you begin to see things. And some of the things you see you don't like, especially the fact that as time passes, you get older, your body begins to betray you. You look at your friends perhaps, you realize that you need money to survive, you need to go to school, you need to have a job. $20 an hour is good, but it's not going to fetch you a nice place to live. Perhaps you're tired of Oakland, whatever the case may be, okay? And so little by little you realize, man, if I had someone at the age of 15 or 16 or 17 or 18 to knock some sense into my thick skull, stay in school. You don't need to like your classes. You don't even need to like your instructors. Stay in school. Take these crummy classes. You'll be done with your lower division courses by the time you're 20. You'll transfer to East Bay, San Francisco, Yale, Oxford. By the time you're 22, you'll be done with your bachelor's. By the time you have your master's, you'll be 25. By the time you have a PhD, you'll be about 30. Now you walk into life with a good amount of power. If only someone would have smacked that particular sense into my thick skull, I wouldn't be going to school at this age. And that's one of the things about regret. And it's not just you. All of us in this class will eventually be forced to have regrets. And what is regret? Missed opportunities, having made the wrong choices. Let me say, if I had listened to my mom and not gone out with that particular person, I wouldn't be married, I wouldn't have a kid. But because I didn't listen to my mom, I mean, that's what regret does. And no one is exempt from it. The story you'll have in the New Testament, I think it's the Gospel of Luke, the prodigal son. It's about that. It's about a guy who loves his father, loves him, but doesn't respect him, certainly doesn't fear him. Looks at his father and says, Dad, you know, I'm 18. I want to go out there and experiment with life. What can the father say? Life is dangerous. Stay in school. You know, be seasoned a little bit. Mature up, think, reflect. No. The kid says, no, I don't want to live like you. I mean, look at you. As all of us in this class look at our parents and we find them to be somewhat losers. You know, I don't want to work a 9-to-5 job. I don't want to stay in this relationship. I mean, look at my parents. They hardly talk. Right? So you say to your dad, Dad, listen, I don't want to be like you. I have wings, I want to fly. I want to do A, B, C, D. I want to be authentic. I want to be creative. I have a voice, you know. And your father comes to realize that, well, you can't make the grass grow by pulling it. It doesn't matter what he says. You just don't listen. None of us listen. I certainly didn't listen. And you certainly didn't listen to some of the wise folks in your own community. You had wings and you flew. And so what does the kid do? When you don't think well about anything, you waste your wealth. And it doesn't need to be money. It could be your youth. It could be your energy. It could be your time. It could be your looks. It could be anything that is of some value that you could use for a path that will bring something positive to your life, but it just becomes a waste. So what does some unreflective 18-year-old do with $50,000? Gambles it, pawns it, smokes it, travels it, buys a ridiculous car with it, invites all of his friends and they have parties every day. But what you have in the story is that it doesn't matter what your wealth is. Eventually, you're going to look into your pocket and you realize it's gone. You may be very attractive, but wrinkles will come. Your body may be healthy, but sickness will come. You will lose your wealth. It's not really up to you. And then once you lose, you will suffer grief. And you know what grief does? It forces you to think. You lost something. You could have protected it, but you didn't, because you didn't know what it means. You didn't know its worth. You didn't respect it. And so eventually this kid in the story, he realizes he's got no money. And he's tired, and he's exhausted, and he's done with life. And he's sleeping with the cows and the pigs and the this and the that. He's homeless. Like all of us in this class, once in a while you feel emotionally abandoned. And so after a good amount of loneliness, sadness, depression, anger, regret, he says, you know what? My father was right. He was always right. Life forces him to respect his father now. So he goes back home and he says, Dad, I'm really sorry. I was an idiot. But the lucky thing for this kid was that his father understood how life functions. He also understood young people, how stupid and crazy they are, that they have wings and they want to fly. And his father didn't hold a grudge. He said, eventually my son will understand. If I can't make him understand, life will force him to understand. And his son walked back. And he takes his kid, he gives him a nice bath, and he takes him to IKEA and buys him nice clothes. And he goes to Trader Joe's and buys him a couple of cows, and they have beautiful barbecue. His brother loved his father. And I suppose to some extent respected his father, but didn't fear, maybe feared as well, but didn't really understand why he loved him. And that's the key. The older son was a yes man. Son, can you take the trash out? Yes, Dad. Can you stay in school? Yes, Dad. It's time for you to get married. Okay, Dad. Okay, it's time for you to have kids. Okay, Dad. Always a yes guy. One day he comes home and sees that the father has created this wonderful party for his son, his brother. This other brother gets jealous. I've been saying yes to you my entire life. You never throw a party for me. You've never bathed me. You've never bought me new clothes. And here's the thing. If you have love and respect without understanding, the very basics of human nature is never going to leave you. You're going to have envy, you're going to have jealousy, you're going to have resentment, you're going to have anger and hate inside you. Because despite being a yes man, he wasn't able to appreciate the fact that his brother has returned. He's learned his lesson. The funny thing about the brother who went out and wasted, without you wasting your life, you're not going to grow. And that's the tragedy of just being a human being. You have to waste. You have to sin. You have to make a lot of mistakes. But that's not enough. Something about you must pause. Something about you must stand still. And you have to be forced to look at all the shitty things you've done. And then you have to feel bad. And that feeling bad will make you humble. And that humility will force you to drag your sorry behind to your father, to your mother, to your friends and say, I'm really, really sorry for being an idiot. Is there anything I can do to make it up? And if you're dealing with some mature people, they will look at you and say, you had no other choice but to be an idiot. I'm glad that you learned your lesson. The door is open. Let's make this work. You know, it takes a long time for us to fear things in a mature way. I know you don't like me, and I know you don't like this class. Don't fear me. Fear failing this class and fear staying at Laney in this semester. That fear, if it's healthy, if it's filled with a good amount of understanding, you will be able to overcome your negative emotions towards me. You will stay in this class. You will get your A or B or C. And then you will be done with Laney. And you will find yourself in a bigger, better school. And then you don't need to like San Francisco. You have a goal. Your goal is, I want to get my bachelor's. That's the thing I fear most, not getting it. Not the instructors, not the classes, not the boredom, not the work. Not getting my bachelor's is going to fear me. And that fear will keep you in school. And I assure you, in 2 years' time, you will thank yourself. But more importantly, you will thank the fear that has lived inside you. Fear is good. Protects your life. Romantic relationships, you're talking about a different ball game. Because first of all, romantic relationships is modern invention. It didn't exist. None of us in this class have the power to go out there and love. For what? First, your religion says no. Second, your society says no. Third, the politics say no. Fourth, you can't fall in love without your parents' permission. Fifth, women don't have a voice. Sixth, poverty is everywhere. There is no middle class. What are you going to live on? Love? You need money. Relationships are not about love. It's about money. It's about children. It's about stability. And no one cares if you're attracted to another human being. That doesn't mean anything. You're also talking about only two genders who have power in society. A man and a woman. That's it. And just in case you're confused about who and what you are, you keep that confusion to yourself. Society has no space for that. They'll punish you for it. It doesn't mean they're right, but they will punish you for it. They have no mercy. And you fear being an outcast. What the hell are you going to do if your parents don't support you? If you have no place in society, what are you going to do? Live in a hut by yourself? What are you going to do with loneliness, with food, with friendships, with depression? Imagine you're thirsty or hungry, and the only place that's open is 7-Eleven, and it's 2 in the morning. And as you drive in, there are 4 people with baseball bats. So what the hell is this? And they're loud, they're obnoxious, they look drunk. Are you fearful of parking your car and getting out? Yeah. Is that good for you? Yeah. Will you survive to see another day? Yeah. You have to be high or drunk not to care and go out there and just get banged up by these people. Will you be deemed courageous by stepping out and fighting these 4 goons? No, you'd be a fool. Fear is what protects you. I suppose the only thing I was trying to suggest in romantic relationships is that in romantic relationships, there's a good amount of freedom that I give you and you give me. But there are some certain lines that are drawn. But our only hope is that you don't cross those lines and I don't cross those lines. Because just in case you do cross them, then that's going to disturb the relationship. Then the 5 years of work that you and I have done to keep this relationship going, it's going to crumble. Then we're going to fight all the time. Then a house that we created to be a home is going to return to a house. And then eventually you're going to leave, or I'm going to leave. And then at my age, at your age, you have to go out there and look for another human being to date? Yuck. Kendra?
Talk about the emptiness of busy life.
It's a saying by the great philosopher Socrates, and we haven't really spoken about philosophy or philosopher, what they mean. Be aware of the barrenness or emptiness of a busy life. It's a saying that's incomplete, and it's a bad saying. And it's a saying by someone who looks at life from a distance, looks at it and finds it meaningless. And it's an imposition. Consider the saying that, in the Gospel of, I think it's the Gospel of Mark, where Jesus walks into the temple or the synagogue, reads from Isaiah, and tells the people, you've been looking at the letter of the law or worshiping the letter of the law, but I'm here to tell you the spirit of the law is useful, beneficial. The letter is garbage. What's the use of just reading a book, but not understanding it, not being transformed by it, right? I mean, that's what he's saying. Here's the thing with Jesus. How cruel he is. And what a jerk he is. Forgive me for those of you who may be Christians in this room. Consider for 1,500 years, you wake up and you realize your father is praying in a Jewish way. Your mother is praying in a Jewish way. They take it to the synagogue every Saturday, and it's beautiful. And then afterwards, you guys go out somewhere, you break bread. Wonderful. And you look at the Old Testament, the tabernacle, and you say, this is sacred. It was written by the hands of God. When you want to look at the book, first you wash your face. When you want to touch it, first you wash your hands. When you want to walk towards it, you wash your feet. And then you say, you know what, maybe I should just take a shower before even looking at the book, touching it, getting close to it. It's sacred. And when something is sacred, it gives you meaning. And when it says, thou shalt not covet, thou shalt not covet. Thou shalt not steal, or thou shalt not steal. They mean something to you. Okay? So remember, for 1,000 years or so, the Jewish people are fine. You know, getting kids or getting married, not for sex, not for pleasure. It's right there in Genesis, procreation. You don't get married because you're lonely. You don't get married because you're depressed. You get married for one reason. That's why you were created. To have kids. Well, kids need money. Marriage needs money. You don't get a job because it's an extension of my soul. You stupid? Understand the politics of life. You need money for rent. You need money for food. You need money to clothe your kids and send them to school. It's a busy life. It's a busy life. From the moment you wake up to the time you go to sleep. Anyone in this classroom who's got kids? I mean, look at your own parents. I mean, I don't know if any of you in this class have ever examined what it means to be a parent. Now, you may have crummy parents, fine. Okay? But for the first few years of them taking care of you, waking up every goddamn minute to feed you, to change your diaper, to always be exhausted. Even though you don't want to work, you have no choice but to go to work. And whatever money you make, you pay it for rent and food. At the end of the month, you got nothing. I mean, this is tough life, okay? So that's how the Jews were for the longest time. Add to the fact that the Romans are butchering them left and right. Now, luckily for them, they have a philosophy of life, a political philosophy, right there in the Old Testament. An eye for an eye. If someone smacks you, smack them back. Understanding them. Are you kidding? Figuring out their history. No, who gives a shit about that? You got kids to feed, man. You have created this life for yourself, and someone is out there wants to take it by force. What are you going to do? Be a Jesus Christ? Turn the other cheek? That's stupid. So Jesus comes and says to them, you know what? The sort of life that you guys have been living is no good. The earth is like a den of thieves. Well, why the hell would you want to store your treasures down here? Everything will rot. Why would you want to invest 110% of who you are into your relationship? Your husband will eventually die, or you will die. Your kids will eventually leave you like the way you left your parents. Whatever home you make will eventually turn into a house. Because human beings can't find home down here. We've been expelled from the Garden of Eden. That's what we really want, to go back to God. And you can't find God down here. And the books you read, ink on paper. It means nothing. Do you know what you're doing to people when you say those things? You're making their life irrelevant. Marriage becomes irrelevant. Having kids becomes irrelevant. Making money becomes irrelevant. Everything is bad. Because you're supposed to live for your soul, not for your body. Kingdom of God is the only thing that requires your attention. That's it. And then he says, you know what? Moses is good, but I'm here to complete him. So the saying of Socrates, which is beware of an empty life. If you're a mom or a dad Or if you're a student, okay, I mean, consider, you're taking 12 units and you live on your own. You have 2 jobs. You come to school at 9, you go home at 3, you take a shower, then you go to work from 6 until midnight. Every ounce of energy that you've had have been taken by your instructors, your school, your own fantasies about this and that, and your job. There is nothing left. And you're doing all of this for one reason. You want to secure a better future. Socrates comes forth and says, what are you doing? You take this class for what? Yes, on paper it says philosophy, modern philosophy, but pay attention. There is nothing in it that nourishes you. Do you really want to waste your time like this? Drop the class. Well, shit, if you drop this class, and if you drop that class, and you find your work meaningless, and you want to live in the streets like a hippie, well, now you have all this space that's empty. It's a big bucket. What are you going to put in it that's meaningful? Well, there isn't much. I don't have the charisma of Socrates to go around, talk, and have people pay me. I have nothing. For the most part, what you have are the commoners, people like me, whose lives are busy. And I try to make it as meaningful as possible. And I don't want to think about how I'm wasting my time. Just in case someone walks into my life and says, Amir, your life is a complete waste, I will befriend them. I don't want to be around them because they're going to make me think. And when I begin to reflect on my life, I'm going to find it meaningless. I don't want that. You're walking, holding hands with your companion, Socrates runs into you. Why are you holding hands? I love him. What does that mean? What do you mean you love him? Can you tell me what love is? Well, love is intense feelings. Well, feelings come, feelings go. That's not love. Well, I love him because I know him. Well, what do you mean you know him? What does it mean to know another human being? Human beings are always changing. And if he's this way today, well, he's going to change tomorrow. Will you love him tomorrow still? And all of a sudden you walk home saying, shit, I thought I knew what love is, but now, after having encountered Socrates, I guess I don't really know. Then you're going to go home with Broch. You're going to say, well, we've never been together for 5 years. Why do I like him? That's a serious question. And then all of a sudden you realize, well, you love him like for 2 hours, and then you question your life for 5 hours, and then you want to like walk away for the rest of the day. That's no life to have. Socrates is like the Kim Kardashian of philosophers. He's got tremendous amount of power. He doesn't love his wife. He rarely spends time with his kids. All he does is sit somewhere, thinks about life and how stupid it is, talks to people, only to realize they're even more stupid than life itself. And then when he asks them questions, he comes to realize they understand zero about anything. Then when they tell him, well, you will either die because you're harassing the public, or you can continue your life but without talking to anyone, he says, you know what? Fuck it. I don't want to live. Life is not worth it. He dies. He doesn't find anything down here meaningful. And the irony is, for some strange reason, people like me who find life meaningful, once I'm dead, I'll be forgotten. I haven't done anything. But for someone like Socrates, who finds the entire human existence laughable, we still talk about him after 2,000 years. Doesn't make any sense. I mean, everybody's just living their lives like rats, and it's meaningful. And then Mahatma Gandhi or Malcolm X, they come about and they make the rest of us feel like crap. Because somehow we have no choice but to compare our life to other people. You compare it to your sister, you compare it to your brother, you compare it to your friend, and you say, man, I can't believe they're teaching like 20 classes, I'm only teaching one. My sister has a boyfriend, I'm a loser. My brother graduated, look at me, I'm working at Home Depot. That's what we do as human beings. You know? And the giants of humanity are Mahatma Gandhi, Malcolm X, John Fire Lame Deer. Jesus Christ, Muhammad, the Buddha. And you read a couple of books and man, that's a life worth living. But how the hell do I do that? What sacrifices do I want to make? And you realize, you know what? I'd rather just hang out with people who are as shallow as I am. That's a life. It's a good life. Yes.
Okay, good. So,
It's a question, right?
my great uncle freed slaves about
He what?
freed slaves.
Oh, Allahu Akbar. We are not talking about slaves.
And back in the day, people used to have slavery to get married for property.
Nothing wrong with that. Yeah, fine.
So you're saying that people just get married not for love,
Yeah,
to have children.
yes.
So then basically you're saying it's not much has changed. Except now people just don't bundle property, but they just have kids and say that's the purpose of marriage, in your opinion? So,
First-
do you see any correlation between that and what you're saying?
Yeah, I think if you were to look at marriage as a business, you would be careful who you should choose to come to your life, into your life. And if you were to study society a bit better, you would think twice about having kids.
Well, if I ever get married, they're gonna have,
Yeah, if.
my family's gonna have to wife too.
Anything?
Yeah. So, I mean, in the story of the two sons, right? So, I think in the lecture it says that wisdom, true wisdom, can only be learned through life experiences, right? So I was wondering, kind of in Zen Buddhism, right? They essentially meditate, and they think true wisdom can be achieved through meditation only, right? So I was wondering how do you define life experiences, or what is considered?
Let me first of all say something about Buddhism. So what you have is the founder, and then you have the followers. You have Jesus, and then you have the followers, what we call Christianity. It's a world of difference. So let me kind of just break it down. What you have is a single man about 3,000 years ago. For a good 19 years, he walks around town. He sees people like me, unshaven, beard gray, hair fallen, wrinkles, and laughs at me. Says, ha, the guy's getting old. Doesn't internalize the experience that, yes, one day too I will get old. Doesn't do that. He just laughs at me. And then he sees me coughing up blood. So, old and sick. Laughs at me again. And then one day, as he's having food, his mom says, remember our neighbor Amir Sabzavari? He died, he had a stroke. Oh, well, he was useless anyways. So, that's the first part of his life. There's a good amount of things around him. He sees, but doesn't study what he sees, doesn't examine what he sees, doesn't reflect about what he sees. That's the common place for all of us human beings. That's where we occupy the most space. A lot of things are happening, but we fail to study. Then magic happens to him, and it's a bad magic. And the magic is this. I walk past by this young kid, and he sees me being old. And he says, what the hell happened to your face? Now, why would you ask that? Because you're curious. You've taken time to stand, to pause, to look, to study, and to become curious. And then I say, well, damn, you're 19, you'll get there, don't worry. And then he says, what the hell does that mean, I'll get there? Is he saying that I too will get old? Now, all of us in this class know we're going to get old, and all of us in this class know we're going to die. Just not today, and not tomorrow. For some strange reason, this kid some 3,000 years ago was in the right place, and I don't know how that comes about. He may be one of those freaks of nature, like a Kobe Bryant, or a Tiger Woods, or a Muhammad Ali, or a Magnus Carlsen, or a Bjorn Borg. Because these are all sports. You have physical sports, you have emotional sports, you have intellectual sports, and you have spiritual sports. And all these different types of sports have their own unique geniuses. I mean, you're not going to go home and think about your age. In a few minutes, you're going to turn to be 60, and your back is going to hurt, and you're going to start forgetting things. You won't think that way. You know why? Because you have hopes, because you have plans for your future. And those plans for your future distract you from the fact that you will get old. And in old age, what do you really need? Okay. Then I run by him again, and now not only am I old, I'm also sick. And when he asks me, what the hell is wrong with you? I say, well, I'm sick. That's what happens when you get old. The point I'm trying to make is he has the capacity and the ability to internalize things. I don't know if you fully understand what it means to internalize something. How old are you? I have been 27. And I have sat where you're sitting. And I desire to get my bachelor's and my master's. And I wanted to have a car. I wanted to have a house. I wanted to get married and have kids. I have been already to places you want to go. I can internalize how difficult it is for you to sit there and listen to me. But you can't internalize my position because you're not yet 60. To internalize means you remove those shoes and you put your feet in my shoes. And you walk where I walk, not literally, metaphorically. What does it mean to be old? Now, when it comes to internalize the awful realities of getting old and getting sick and dying, then we get to Kendra's question, what is worth pursuing in life? What is really meaningful? And for the Buddha, certainly not the life he was living. Now, when you begin to ask these questions, what happens to you? Well, you want answers. I mean, that's what our frontal lobe does. You want to go out there and figure out this puzzle. Dad, if I'm going to die, get old, get sick, become weak and feeble and forgotten, is there anything I can do to protect myself against these realities? And for the first time you realize you love your father, but he's incompetent. So you read the Gospel of John. It's a waste of your time. You take classes, that's a waste of your time. When you ask serious questions, you realize no one is able to answer you in a way that is sufficient for you. Then you feel alone, isolated. Then you walk into the forest because life can't offer you much. And in the forest, what happens? Okay, so you pray, so you meditate, you do this, you do that. You may even have an out-of-body experience. You may even see Jesus Christ sitting next to you and giving you a pep talk. But he says, I don't want experiences. I really want to understand. And that's the thing. Most of us in this class, myself included, we are junkies. We are after like tiny bits of emotional inspiration. I want to read a book to be inspired. That's not what the Buddha wants. He doesn't want to be inspired. He wants to understand. And that's a difficult thing. I mean, imagine you never had a relationship with your father because he was never really part of your life. Maybe he was far too selfish. Maybe he was a drunk. Who the hell cares? Okay? For all these years, you've reacted. I hate my father. But for the first time now, something about you happens, an opening. You want to understand why your father was such a jerk. You really want to understand. And so, like a good detective, you ask your mom. And your mom says, your father, his father was a drunk. He beat him up every single day. And your father left the house when he was 6. He said, really? Yeah. Your father had no protectors. He worked at Home Depot and then in and out. And then he was in prison. And then somehow, after sobering up, he went to AA. He made his life work a little bit, but still was profoundly angry. So I never knew any of that. Well, now you do. And the moment you begin to understand, you realize the more you understand, the less you begin to hate your father. And the more you begin to feel bad for all the things that a kid needs to have, but he didn't have. And that's what the Buddha wants. Not once in a while picking up the phone saying, Dad, it's okay, I forgive you. And then hating him for another 6 months. Now, eventually, the Buddha comes to understand a few things about life, right? Now, when you understand something really, really well, something happens to you. You become like a magnet. But as a human being, when you become a magnet, paper clips don't attract you. What slowly move towards you are human beings. The Buddha begins to gravitate or pull people towards him. His charisma, his magnetism, there is something about the way he is. And when you look at his philosophy, it's very, very, very dark and gloomy. But nobody cares. Because there is something about understanding that creates honesty. And inasmuch as you may hate to hear honesty, there is something about us that is profoundly attracted to it. Even though something says you can't like it, hate it, fight against it, but you also embrace it. Okay? When the Buddha goes to the forest, he leaves a culture behind. He leaves a wife behind. He leaves a son behind. He leaves his family behind. When you speak about Zen Buddhism, you're talking about people who have no husbands or wives, who have no culture. The only culture they have is they are born at the age of 2, they begin to read sutras. You have no idea how difficult it is to walk away from a parent, to walk away from a culture, to walk away from power because he was meant to be a prince. Is it still commendable for people to walk into the desert, close their eyes, make sure their body doesn't move for 5 hours, and have a vision? It's great, it's beautiful. But they lack something that the Buddha didn't lack. They know what it means to be human. They know what it means to be in human relationships. And they know how difficult it is to walk away. The Dalai Lama is great. He says wonderful things. But he was put in a basket, taken out of Tibet at the age of 6 months old. He was never married. He didn't have a son or a daughter, or maybe he did, he just doesn't know, who the hell knows, right? But what I'm trying to say is that the founder has no choice but to struggle through all the attachments, attachment to the culture, the narratives, his own desires and passions, whereas the monks in the Zen Buddhist tradition don't have to, because they don't have those things. Some people just enjoy experiences without understanding them. I mean, look, I don't know if you smoke weed or not, but if you do smoke weed, or if you have friends who smoke weed, I assure you, yeah, well, good. I'm glad you don't anymore. But for those who smoke weed, and I'm not talking about having a stage 4 cancer, I'm not talking about having migraines, just talking about it's just part of the culture. You've had friends who smoked, they invited you, you took a couple of puffs, you liked it, and it became a routine of your life. What usually happens is when you smoke, it gives you experience. Now, why don't you go and hang out with some Native Americans, authentic Native Americans? or Mexicans, say certain parts of Arizona. And what you'll discover is this. Before they actually allow you to smoke, there are certain stages you need to go through, certain rituals you need to perform. You're not here to have a good time, man. You're here to understand certain things that are profoundly serious. And then when it's time for you to smoke, they'll give you the peyote. But you will smoke at the same time knowing where it came from, what the culture demands. You don't do it for fun. You don't even do it for pleasure. You do it for transformative insights. Okay? So, could going to the monastery, closing your eyes and having an experience become a foundation of a transformation? Could be, yeah. But it usually takes a long time, about 20 years. I've forgotten your question. I usually have a tendency of rambling on and on and on about useless things. So. Anyone else?
Somewhat related to what you were already talking about, but sometimes you mention Krishnamurti, right? That he stands outside of life, gives us these ideas about nice to life, that he himself wasn't married, have children.
This is just my own bias, and biases are usually the outcome of experiences that you assume to have given you some insights about things. So I'm sure there are other people out there who can give you a different perspective about things. But this is the way I kind of see things. Let's say that you come to this class because you need to fulfill certain requirements, and you've declared your major to be business or stats or something, whatever. And you want to make some money, you want to get a better job, you want to get married, have children. Okay, that's a good portion of who and what you are. That's a huge self to have on the inside, with a good amount of agenda. Let's say you come to this class and we talk philosophy, and all of a sudden something about you comes out, stands here. It's a tiny little self, a tiny little Alexis that looks back and says, I thought I wanted to do business, but maybe, just maybe, I should minor in philosophy. Okay. And then you continue to come to class, and this maybe becomes more concrete. No, I actually do want to major, have a double major, business and philosophy. Then you take philosophy a little too seriously, where you begin to examine this part of you. Remember now, you have two parts. Initially, you only had one. An Alexis who wants to go to school, get his bachelor's, a master's, a PhD in philosophy, get a job, and live a happy life. All of a sudden, this new Alexis is born, and it's a tiny little seed. And this seed could easily be crushed, but for some strange reason, it keeps blossoming. It grows bigger and bigger and bigger. Why? Well, you didn't drop the class. It made you more curious. You began to ask more questions. You began to listen more attentively. You began to pay attention. Then you began to read books. Then you began to reflect. Then you began to ask questions from your companion. And all of a sudden, it's not that these things don't mean anything. You keep seasoning it. You keep cooking it. And it becomes a big Alexis. Now you have two Alexis inside one body. One says business, the other says yuck. Now these two will wrestle. Now, once something about you has been born and you begin to see things, it's really, really difficult to go back. It's one thing to have come from a culture that says arranged marriage is good, and you get married, arranged. And then unintentionally, you fall in love. And it's the first time you've experienced love. You have wings. And all of a sudden, you just think about one human being in ways you've never felt and thought before. And it's inspiring. And it's a new thing. And it brings life to your soul. Okay? And you want to feel the same way about your husband, but it's magic. It's non-negotiable. You can't transfer it here. It doesn't work. And the more you try to just blindly, become blind to this romanticism and go back to this traditional way, what has been born inside you is not going to be terminated. It just can't. Especially if it's like fully developed now. You think about this person all the time, And so, once something about you says, I no longer want to do business, I can't see myself in this world anymore. You want to do philosophy, but you have no idea how your future is going to be. It's a big question mark. And that's the other thing you need to understand about us human beings. Even if there are certain parts of your life you don't like, and they've been around you for many, many, many years, they will tell you who you need to hate. They will tell you who the enemy is. They will tell you why your life is the way you are. You have a villain in your life. That villain has given you meaning and purpose. And when you go to a therapist office, you know exactly what you need to talk about. The villain who's messed up your life. And in as much as you hate it, you have no idea what to do if it leaves you. If your father was no longer the main issue in your life, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to talk about? Who are you going to hate? Okay? So stability, routine, habits is something we enjoy profoundly. If the things I say in this class, okay, go against some of your own positions, well, your position is the outcome of habits, thinking a specific way about certain things over and over and over again. You're not going to accept anything that I say, especially if there are broken parts to you. You're going to resist, and you're going to fight, and you're going to drop the class and go your way. Okay? So remember, one of the reasons as to why we don't welcome new things is because they create insecurity about us. How am I supposed to think about this? What am I supposed to do with myself now? Okay. So what Krishnamurti does, he creates a whole host of insecurities. I mean, consider this tiny little book. What is it called? The Flowering of Oneself. It's a pamphlet, maybe 5 pages, 10 pages. It's about love. Is love about jealousy? No, he says. Is love about attachment? No, he says. Is love about possessiveness? No, he says. Well, shit, if I'm walking my wife around the lake and a man keeps looking at her, I'm going to be angry. Do I own my wife? You're fucking right, I own my wife. Does she own me? Yes. Why? 10 years of story making. He's not just taking my wife. He's taking stories. He's taking identity. He's taking my history. And what Krishnamurti says is just unrealistic. But for some strange reason, possessing another human being is so unsavory. It's wrong. Love, yes, it should be free. If my wife comes to me and she says she loves another man or woman or a dog, She said, well, thank God that God has come down, looked at you and said, you're worthy of another love experience. Go out there, have a good time. Life is short. Whatever works. You've come to life. Hallelujah. It sounds right. But for me, a puny, pathetic human being, no, it's not right. Not only will I kick the guy's ass, I will probably beat up my wife as well. Attachment. Are you kidding? Am I not supposed to be attached to my wife? We have kids. If she leaves me, who the hell's going to raise those kids? Is love about fear? Yeah. The problem with Krishnamurti is, yeah, he's right about all of it. But if I was to accept his values, how is my life going to run? Who am I going to love? I'm not a hippie. I'm a human being getting older, getting sicker, moving slowly towards my death. I want someone who cares to me, is attached to me, to take me to Kaiser, to make me soup, to pamper me. I want stability in my life, man. The sort of way Krishnamurti talks about. Just be like a hippie, whatever works. The problem is, it's good to walk towards people like Socrates or Jesus or Nietzsche cautiously. Cautiously. You know, every gig that Angela Davis has, she's a great thinker, a great human being. She gets paid about 10 to 20 to 50,000 bucks for every 2-3 hours. I don't make that. I go listen to her, she inspires me. But her inspiration has the power to uproot my life. And I don't know from that point on where my life is going to head towards. And I certainly don't want to be homeless. So will she inspire me? Yes. Will my life be ruined? Maybe. Is it worth it? No. And I don't even know if I have magic inside me. I mean, I like to go into a cave and meditate like Muhammad. But I may never turn out to be a prophet. I want to leave my parents like Jesus and go and figure out what truth is. I may just have a mental breakdown and die in the middle of nowhere and suffer a painful death. Just because some guy did it some 2,000 years ago and was successful, it doesn't mean I am. It's good to see you all. Have a nice day. I will see you next week, Monday. Bye.